Today we are going to be taking a look at the PC performance of Vanquish, which is a PC port of a game that came out several years ago. I actually played this when it first came out on the Xbox 360, and it was a fantastic game. Honestly, one of my favorite games of that generation, and I wanted to bring you guys a performance video on this, not only because the game is actually running really well and because people are curious how it runs and all of that, but because I just wanted to raise awareness about this title for maybe some people that are just hardcore, lifelong PC gamers that didn't get a chance to play this game on console, or maybe you've never even heard of it. This game is from Platinum Games, who are responsible for other titles like, they've done a Transformers title recently, they did Ninja Turtles, they also did Bayonetta, which was probably one of their most well-known games. So they do really awesome beat-em-up type games, usually. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance was another Platinum Games title, so this is a little bit different than those in the sense that this is actually a cover-based third-person shooter. It's got slow motion in it, so you can kind of like slide across the floor and go into slow motion as you're firing guns. You've got mini-bosses. You've got big, gigantic bosses that you have to weaken by taking down some of their limbs and then taking out like a central core point. And this happens throughout the game. The bosses get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there just becomes more and more enemies, and it gets very difficult actually towards the end of the game, and it is an absolute blast. It's so good, and you can get it right now on Steam. It's only $20 this game, so I highly recommend people picking it up, as I've already completed this game back on console. I completed it twice actually, the second time being on the hardest difficulty, which was not easy at all. So when I heard that this port was coming to the PC, I was absolutely elated, and I couldn't wait to bring you guys a video on this, and I'm glad that the PC port is actually shaping up really well. I didn't have any issues running this game on my RX 480 or my GTX 1060, which is where we will be focusing our performance. I did do my own play testing on my 1080 Ti on my 1440p screen, and it was obliterating the frame rates with no issue. So I've actually been playing it on 4K off my 1080 Ti without breaking a sweat. The game is optimized very well on the PC. They've done a damn good job with the port. You've got fully customizable key bindings. You could even do secondary key options. They've got mouse sensitivity options you can adjust sliders from 0 to 100 for normal aiming as well as zoom. So you've got all of that customization in there that you would like to see on a really good quality PC port. And the fact that the game itself is amazing just kind of, makes it a happy marriage. So do yourself a favor and pick it up. But we're going to focus on the performance here in this video. I just had to give this game some high praise so that you guys know how much of a fan I am for this title. But before we get into all of the numbers on the GTX 1060 and the RX 480, I want to let you know the system specs that we're using here. I was on the latest drivers, so for Nvidia that's 382.33. And on the AMD side, it was 17.5.2. And all of my testing was in my new Gladiator system, along with the Ryzen 1600, which I have overclocked at 3.8 gigahertz and 16 gigabytes of RAM at 2933 megahertz. I just did a video on that system earlier today. If you missed it and you want to see a really sweet build, I recommend you go back and take a look at that video. But getting into the graphics options menu right now, you can see I am running at 4K, although I did my testing at 1080p and 1440p on the RX 480 and the GTX 1060. I just happen to be recording this off of my 1080 Ti rig. Right now I am running in full screen, but they've got window, full screen, as well as borderless windowed mode. Graphics quality, they do have... Why did that do that? What's it doing? There we go. We've got low, normal, high, or custom. I am on a custom option right here. On the anti-aliasing option, we have edge anti-aliasing at 2 times, 4 times, or 8 times, which is what I was using. I was using the 8 times edge anti-aliasing option, or they do have FXAA if you want to use that, but I'm not really a big fan of that, as I find it kind of just blurs the line, so I ended up using the edge anti-aliasing option at 8x. Texture quality here, we can see you've got it at high, and that is the highest that this goes. Everything in here is maxed out completely, the highest that I could put it. For anisotropic filtering, we have that up at times 16. Shadow quality running at high. SSAO, also they've got low, normal, and high, and I'm running that up at high in all of my testing. They do have HDR option in here, and even though I'm not running an HDR monitor, it allowed me to put that on. So I guess we have HDR support in Vanquish. Awesome to see that. We also have a toggle for LOD, as well as the motion blur, which I did run that off. I did not use motion blur in any of my testing. And of course, I ran VSync off, and they do have 144 Hz refresh rate support. So you can go ahead and use your high refresh rate monitor if you want to use that in this game. No frame rate lock of any kind. I was seeing my frames going over 200 frames per second sometimes on the 1080 Ti at 1440p, so you don't have to worry about a capped frame rate or anything like that here in this PC port on Vanquish. But taking a look at the numbers now, we're going to start off at 1080p here, and you'll be seeing the side-by-side comparison with the RX 480 on the left and the GTX 1060 on the right. The RX 480, as always, I do have that at 1400 megahertz on the core and 2150 megahertz on the memory, while the GTX 1060 is increased by an additional 200 megahertz on the core and 300 megahertz on the memory. So going through that there on 1080p through my benchmark run, which I tried to recreate as accurate as possible, but by also having a lot of stuff going on the screen, so you're not able to really create a perfect side-by-side comparison, but I think most people will agree that neither one of these sides of the screen is seeing any more action than the other. It just might be one side might have an explosion over here versus half a second on the other side, so really not a big deal. I think that this was a very even comparison in this benchmark run that I was able to recreate very well, going back and forth between the different cards and the resolution. So at 1080p, the RX 480 ended up pulling in an average of 95 FPS with a 1% low of 81 and a 0.1% low of 74, while the GTX 1060 actually did considerably better, getting an average of 120 with a 1% low of 95 and a 0.1% low of 81. So the Nvidia card here up against the RX 480 is just getting a lot more frames in this particular title. That doesn't mean, either one of the RX 480 can't run the game, but without a doubt, we're seeing a very large disparity in the frames there. That's a 25 FPS difference in the average, which is nothing to scoff at. We're not looking at margin of error there. That is a very large difference in frame rate between these two GPUs. Switching over to 1440p now, that story continues where both of the cards perfectly capable of running this game 1440p maxed out. I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about lag in this particular title as it's optimized very well, but the 1060 did pull ahead once again here. On the RX 480, we saw an average of 71 FPS with a 1% low of 57 and a 0.1% low of 53. While on the GTX 1060, we got an average of 86 with a 1% low of 64 and a 0.1% low of 55. So with the 0.1% being down below 60 frames, you can tell that there were times where it was just dipping below 60 a little bit. But honestly, in my playing, I didn't even notice that. I didn't even know it had dropped below 60 until I went back and looked at the numbers, because it was completely buttery smooth as I was playing the game. And I was playing on a FreeSync display, but even with the GTX 1060, it was perfectly smooth. I didn't have any massive lag spikes or anything like that. It was a smooth transition. It was just some parts where it got more taxing than others, with lots of explosions and particle effects going off on the screen. So I've got no complaints whatsoever about the performance on this particular title. It's unfortunate that we are seeing such a large disparity, though, between the 1060 and the 480, which usually kind of trade blows in terms of frame rate and are usually very, very close. This is a pretty big difference here, so maybe AMD will push out a driver release to kind of optimize a little bit better for Vanquish, but being this is, not a huge new AAA title, I'm not sure if we'll see optimized drivers for a game like this. Like I said, it's only $20 over on Steam. It's not even available on CD keys. I did look, so I can try to, get you guys over there so I can make a few bucks off this video. But it really doesn't matter during the day, because this is an amazing game. I highly recommend it. It runs well on both cards. I would venture to guess that even a potato GPU like a GTX 950 or a GT 1030 would probably be able to power this game reasonably well at 1080p. So I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts on Vanquish down in the comments below, especially if you played this game back on the console and you're excited about it being on the PC. Let me know about it down in the comments, and leave a like on this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're not already, because I'm always doing PC game performance reviews like this as soon as titles come out. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Ta-ra.